Karmic Monday event. Okay.
Watching your loved ones suffer can be crippling and all-consuming. Stop the chaos and let Diamore Healthcare take it from here. At Diamore Healthcare, our innovative, world-class team of professionals provide both inpatient mental health and residential addiction services. We are changing the landscape of psychiatry.
Diamore helped to turn his life around. I'm so grateful to them for helping him get his life back.
From chronic mental illnesses to addiction, the Diamore difference is professionalism, dignity, and compassion. Diamore Healthcare brings every patient to a higher level of functioning and quality of life. Get relief from the chaos and call Diamore Healthcare at 800-755-1028. Diamore Healthcare. Come back stronger. Most PPOs accepted. Call 800-755-1028. That's 800-755-1028.
The following program is a paid presentation. The views and or opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KWAN.
Religion, science, myths, and legends all point toward the next evolution in human consciousness. What do the invisible realms hold? Who's telling us and how do they know? We're investigating insights from around the world to answer the question, what does the material world rise out of and where do we go once we drop the body? You're about to go interdimension with Robert Wallace and Adam Jeffrey to undiscovered spiritual realities.
Unfurl your magical flying yoga mats, because we have untested spiritual shenanigans coming your way this hour. That's what you were looking to hear, right? It's Robert Wallace and Adam Jeffrey here. First, we're going to discuss a method for understanding the karmic reasons for mundane events. So we're going to go into past lives on that one. And then that's followed by the mystical advice that will solve any problem you're having right now. So go ahead, get all your sorrows nice and bundled up together so we can take care of them all at once. And then we're going to be talking to Curtis Childs. He's the host of the metaphysical YouTube sensation Swedenborg Life, which can be found on the offTheLeftEye channel on YouTube. He's a hero of mine because of what he does. You're going to love him. It's great. Adam, how you doing?
Hello. Great. How you doing, Robert?
I'm doing good. So, you had a good week? Anything mystical happened to you this week?
Really, really good week.
Good.
Yeah, a lot of mystical stuff, yeah.
Okay.
Lots of cool prayer and meditation moments and learning some new things and some cool new experiences. Yeah, how about you?
Yeah, doing good. Let me see, mysticism. I mean, I'm always going interdimension a little bit.
Yeah.
Always something new every day.
Cool.
Can't talk about it every day or nobody will let me talk anymore. So
That's true. I totally feel you on that one. Yeah.
Amazing D. Delois.
Yes, sir.
Anything magical happened to you this week?
I woke up this morning.
That's
There you
magical.
go.
Yes.
That is very magical,
It is
yeah.
very magical.
Very spiritual in and of itself. It's true.
Indeed.
I want to share something I found with y'all today. I just read this a couple days ago. It's called An Exercise for Karmic Insight, and it's a little book. It's really just a lecture by Rudolf Steiner. And in it, he discusses a method for how one might find the past life karmic reason for why even the most mundane thing occurs to a person.
Cool.
So I'm going to kind of just fill you in. I'm going to fill you in on what he said. So basically, if something happened to you, you had some cereal this morning, something unremarkable, you could actually mock that up in your mind, and by putting the pieces together and rebuilding it in your mind, you actually are creating an image that your astral body, which is your soul, can work with when you go to sleep that very next night. And while you're sleeping, the angels in your astral body will actually rework the image. So they'll add to it, they'll reform it, they'll contribute to it.
Very cool.
So the idea is when you wake up the next morning, you're presented with another form of the image, and then by the next night, your etheric body is working on it, and by the night after that, it's being impressed into your physical body. The third day, now Steiner explains that this method of mocking up this image and letting it approach you, it may take several attempts, but once you've got it working, you'll find that by the third day you'll be presented with an image, an objective static image that's been refined through the spiritual world of the original image of what happened in this life, and it turns into something you don't recognize. And we also find ourselves locked into that image. We feel bound or chained to it. And so what he explains is that at that moment, if we move from this image that we feel stuck in, chained to, and we don't understand it, and we move from that into the initial image that we formed 3 days prior, we'll actually have an epiphany, and we'll remember that this new image is actually an image of something that happened to us in a past life, and it is the cause for the original scene that we mocked up. And so we can say, oh, I had my cereal box fall off the table because of something I did, 1,500 years ago, or something.
Wow.
Just the smallest thing.
Interesting.
So anyway, this is just one lecture. I'm going to start working on these processes, and I'll give you updates and
That's really cool.
let you know some past life insights.
Do you think that there's a correlation between the references to the third day and its significance biblically? Like example, like Jesus, obviously after the crucifixion, he rises, he's resurrected on the third day. Do you think there's a correlation there between Steiner's exercise?
I would never put it past any of these things. It seems like anytime there's a rhythm,
Yeah,
anytime there's a story, there's an allegory, there's a connection.
yeah, that just hit me. It's
That's good.
yeah. It's funny because it's similar to the name of our musical collective too, 3 Day Flight. It's the third day that we get flight, and it's cool to see that happening. It's the rhythm, man. It's so cool.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. 3 days is a significant period of time, and in the ancient initiation techniques too. They put somebody into a tomb or into a coma state for 3 days and 3 nights.
Okay.
While they go through a spiritual initiation. Now, this is thousands of years ago.
Right.
They were doing the pyramids and things like that.
Yeah.
And in that way, the Hierophants would actually initiate people in the spiritual realms, culminating, according to Steiner, in the phrase by the initiate, "Oh my God, how thou hast glorified me." This is the final thing. They come out and they wake up and they feel so glorified because of what they just experienced.
Amazing.
And they go on enlightened initiates.
Yeah.
So I told you to get all your woes together. Make sure you got them all depressing, sadness, and everything, because I'm going to give you 2 silver bullets for taking care of those, okay? And you've heard them before, so, lower your expectations, but open your mind. The first is, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things will be added unto you. There's a good chance that a lot of the problems that are coming into your life are a result of not kingdom first thinking.
Yeah.
As they're calling it these days. Kingdom first, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other piece of advice is, Jesus said you'll fulfill the law and the prophets if you do this. Love God and love one another as yourselves. So there's a lot of problems which, through the release of our pride, through our own humility, we can solve simply by following either one of these. Put your attention on where you're going in God. Don't worry about the things of the world. Treat others the way you want to be treated, and in that way resolve your own egoistic hurts and pains that are being unfulfilled. Those become non-issues at that point.
Nice.
I like that.
It's great advice. Yeah.
Hopefully it fixes all your problems in life. All right. Next thing, we are going to talk to Curtis Childs here in just a moment. And before we talk to him, I just want to throw a little subject into your all's heads. It's a concept that Rudolf Steiner calls threefolding. He's discussing something called the threefold social order. And in it, he's discussing the spiritual impact on the individual life, the spiritual life, on the rights political life, which is talking about civic laws, we're talking about politics, and how they're aimed at the human, at the individual, as opposed to serving their own purposes for growing a giant government that's run by, zombies or something. This is a people first sort of approach.
Right.
And And then the economic approach. And I think key to his lessons there is you're going to work, you're working for a paycheck. What is your byproduct to the world? Are you giving this product? Is this product helping people? Does this product not fulfill a need in the world? You know, what you do is more important than just the paycheck that you're getting for it. And if we all can work with a human first approach, what is this given to the people? How is this taking care of people? We can actually survive, but because money has become more important, the political system is reared in that direction, or vice versa, you know.
Yeah.
We need an individual revival. So anyway, we'll talk about that next week because that's a very loaded subject. Meanwhile, we do have Curtis Childs on the line. Curtis Childs is the host of a show called Swedenborg Life, as I mentioned, located on offTheLeftEye. Oh, and before we do that, Curtis, please hang on because I want to get this hat off my head. Okay?
Uh-oh.
Let me address the hat that I have on my head right now. I'll ask you a quick question. The Bible says to pray without ceasing. Isn't that right, Adam?
It does indeed, yes.
But then it also says in the New Testament that if a man prays with his head covered, it's a shame to him. So I'm thinking, how can I both pray without ceasing and never really put on a hat since it shames my head? So with that said, I'm taking off the hat, folks.
Interesting.
Don't judge Adam.
you don't want me to take my hat off. You will judge my Einstein here today.
It's fantastic.
Hey, there's an interesting thing about that. I know that you have to have had this experience too because we both traveled to Jerusalem. But when we did, have you noticed that that in Jerusalem, when they go into a holy place, they actually cover their heads.
I know, but see,
right?
they're Jewish, and this is New Testament stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, you're right.
So
you're
right.
I already know.
I let them off the hook on that.
That was fun, though.
Hey, Curtis, are you there? Curtis Childs. All right. It's good to talk to you. We're on a show called Spiritual Realities. We're talking about spiritual realities. Your show's about spiritual realities. All you do is talk about Swedenborg and the awesome revelations that he shared with the world. I have to say, it's inspired me for many, many years. Your sense of humor is amazing. And everybody out there should really look up Swedenborg Life on YouTube and watch Curtis Childs go at it. Curtis. Yeah. Yeah, of course. So, do you have, right off the top of your head, you know, we talked briefly, we're going to go in any which direction. I know Swedenborg spends much of his time talking about angels, the conversations that he had with angels, their daily habits and their lifestyle and things like that. But after all these years, what would you say is probably the most astonishing thing that you've learned about the life of angels according to Swedenborg? Oh, yeah. Yes. Clever. Thank you for that.
Wow.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good point. Is he's given you all these very practical, tangible sort of aspects. I mean, tangible is the wrong word, but and yeah, you can apply it, and it'll get you into that zone. Swedenborg talks about the thoughts, the thought life. Even I remember one of his stories. He's sitting there, he's going to sleep, getting ready to dream, and two angels are actually having a conversation next to him, and that influences dream life.
Turn it up some more.
It's a live, can you guess?
This show are being influenced by what we're put out there. So we're in this big network as far as the world around us that we experience and how we think and feel. And Swedenborg said that there is an extension of that network, that actually consciousness, where it's not that the whole rest of the world is connected, but our consciousness is an isolated thing, that actually the stuff we experience day to day, thoughts and feelings, are influenced not just by other people that we meet and interact with, but directly through the spiritual world, that it's like a continuum of consciousness comes out of the divine through the spiritual world into us. And he gave these amazingly specific and like bizarre, but yet when you hear them, you think, okay, that I could see how that could fit in with the rest of life. Right. Descriptions of how that works. And so, yeah, he was saying that there's a thing that's called correspondences, and that is basically the spiritual world communicating with the physical world in a language that it can understand. If you think about trying to tell a kid about like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old about the stock market, they're just not going to have the concepts to grasp that. But you try to make up some story or some analogy in the language of things they do understand. Like, what if this toy, all the other toys wanted this toy instead of this toy? That's kind of what correspondences are, right? Is that's the oh, and yeah, it relates to, you guys were talking about 3 days, and that this is a time period, but it seems to signify something more, that it signifies a completeness, and that the spiritual world Swedenborg was describing is it's outside of time and space, so they don't have the same 24-hour periods that we do, but yet what they mean when they say 3 days is something that signifies totality or completeness, but we can understand because we know what a day is, so it helps us hold that. Anyway, so he was seeing this in action because he was getting ready to sleep, and at that time he was in his spiritual eyes, as he said, it had been opened, and he was aware of all the spiritual influence that we only become aware of in its effects, but he could see the causes of it. And he was hearing these angels, and they were having a conversation, and everything that they talked about showed up in his dreams. But it wasn't that it was their direct words. It was what they talked about showed up in correspondences in the things that were in his mind. So, for example, the example he gives is they were having a conversation about a certain superficial kind of mindset that is more focused, like you were mentioning before, on financial reward and your own place in the hierarchy of the world rather than how you can better serve the human race through your actions. So, because they were talking about that, a person that he knew from his regular life that he believed had that kind of mindset showed up in his dream. You ever had a dream and you're like, why was this person in my dream? Well, he was saying that's because that was his mind reacting to their spiritual content with his physical ideas. So somebody else could have heard those same angels talking in their dream, and they would have had their own imagery. It would have been telling the same story, but through the things that mattered to them. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, I thank you for sharing that. Another related tale, and I don't know why I'm just prompting you to tell stories I could tell on my own, but you just tell them so much better, is the idea of communities in heaven and hell. And I really like this idea because it fills in a lot of blanks. We die, and we're oriented into the spiritual world, and then we are sent off to find our place in the communities of heaven or the communities of hell, depending on our loves.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
And the fascinating thing is Swedenborg, he talks about a afterlife where there's heaven and hell, but there's been sort of a traditional view of, oh man, if I go to the afterlife and you get either raised up into heaven or thrown into hell against your will. But really, what he's saying is that you go where the thing that you love is, and communities there. That in the spiritual world, you could call the spiritual world the psychological world, because the main difference between it, as I understand it, and the world that we're in right now is the physical world that we inhabit is the nature of it is dictated by physical laws. That physical things are what really shape everything. Meaning, why am I staying in my chair rather than going somewhere? It's because gravity. Gravity is what matters most. Mass, electromagnetism, magnetism, all that is what makes things the way they are. But in the spiritual world, it's love and wisdom. What conscious beings, what people love and care about, their motivations, and what they think about and believe, those have as much of an impact. So love takes approximate place to gravity in the spiritual world. So what you love, and when I mean what you love, is what you care about, what your goal is, what you're really trying to do in each of your actions, that pulls you towards one of these communities. And it could be that, let's say, I am completely obsessed with myself, right? And that what I'm trying to do is, in any conversation I get into, let's say I'm talking on the radio to you guys right now, and all I'm caring about is how can I sound like I'm the wisest guy in the room? How can I make sure everyone thinks I'm awesome? What can I do? I'm giving out information, but really what's behind it is myself. So if that was really what I based my life around, I get into the spiritual world, and I would be gravitated toward a community of people that all love themselves in the same way that I love myself. And you could see how that could be a bit of a hell if everybody's trying to be the best all the time. So you have these central loves, and not only that, but the loves that are good, which it's not that you can't have any affection for yourself, and it's impossible not to have any trace of ego. With Swedenborg, it's really about prioritizing. It's that you're trying to, the goal is to try to get it so that the most important thing, which is, I love the example, the phrasing you put around it, which is people-centered. That when I'm thinking about my impact and what my motivation is for doing the daily things I do, if the greatest good is that I'm going to try to be useful and helpful, that is the soul of heaven. That heaven is this giant grouping of all kinds of people who want to help in different ways. He actually says that it's organized a lot like the human body. If you think about the human body as a model of the ultimate in cooperation and in sort of selfless interdependence, you think about the liver, liver cell, all it's doing is purifying, and that's its function, and it's used to, like, what I'm going to put my ATP and my energy into is making the body healthy through this purifying of this thing. So I'm performing some use, and at the same time, I'm getting everything I need from all these other communities that are doing what they need to make the body healthy. So you have the heart pumping blood, you have the lungs taking in oxygen, you have the muscles for locomotion and everything. Each one of those giving everything they have to the common good and receiving everything that they need. That is a picture of heaven. So Swedenborg even goes so far as to talk about the communities of heaven as they correspond to the body. So you have some people in heaven who what they love is to think and understand things and figure things out, and that would be like the brain in the body, and so on and so on. So you've got these communities, but even the communities are organized in a giant community as well.
Awesome.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I think you hit on. I'm sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, I was just like, yeah, I know it is pretty beautiful. That's what keeps me so entranced with Swedenborg's material, and just sitting there talking for 1,000,000 hours on YouTube about it.
And you've done a great job, you and your team of animators and producers and everything, because it's got a lot of production value in it, and it's taught a lot of people a lot of things. I think one of the...
For sure. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to say, I work with a really great team, and So tons of credit to them for everything that we've had in terms of success, and that we're trying to, do the ideas justice by working in the best sort of medium that we can.
Awesome. Yeah, and you're doing a great job. You touched on usefulness, and I think it's worthwhile to mention that because we think about, well, when we die, we're going to basically become useless. We're going to be in a cloud. We're going to have our harp or whatever, and we're going to laze about. But the reality is everybody gets a job. Everybody's doing something. People have lives. They have schedules. They have places to be. They have activities that they do.
Go ahead.
In connection with that, I wanted to see if you would talk a little bit about the heavenly expectations that newly dead people have when they move over to the other side, and how Swedenborg saw them being re-educated.
It's not a totalitarian system there. It's not that, hey, everybody think like this, and if you don't follow the pattern, there's going to be immediate consequences. There's so much that Swedenborg describes of, that's what you want? Okay, go for it. And hopefully eventually you see what the truth is. He has this fascinating section. He opens his book, Amor Conjugialis, or Conjugal Love with, where he sees these groups of people who had what he claims are inaccurate ideas of what heaven is and what heavenly happiness is. And there's some people, and a lot of these were informed heavily by the religious climate of Swedenborg's day. There's a lot of ideas, like you were mentioning, of we're going to sit around on a cloud with a harp. And so there's a lot of people who assumed that that's what the afterlife consisted in. One of Swedenborg's primary points is that we take our life with us. If you think about the way that life is here, this is the starting point for eternal life. They're not totally different. So just think about what a life of idleness, permanent idleness, would be like. Would that ever, is there any way that could not get boring eventually? You think that there's nobody, you think about the people who are the richest people in the world, who get to have the best house on the best cliff overlooking the nicest water in the world, that it's not like you hear about people just disappearing into a sea of joy because they have this amazing life. Celebrities of every kind, rich people, contentment does not come automatically with having, something nice. There's boredom that can set in anywhere. So there was people who thought, hey, if I go to heaven, it's going to be great. We're going to feast all the time. It's going to be this amazing banquet forever. And so Swedenborg saw them. The angels that were there were like, okay, sure, here you go. Have at it, and I hope you have a great heaven. And the same thing with people who thought heaven was eternal, an eternal church service. Like, we're going to pray and sing songs to glorify God continually. There was other people who thought that heaven actually consisted in being aggrandized and important, that they would get to sit there and be waited on by angels and be like rulers in this world, and that was the greatest joy. It all gets at, what do you think really can make us happy? What's the nature of the happiness you're looking for? So these people all went, and they got to do it, and after about 4 or 5 days, they were going crazy. They were out of there. This is terrible. We want out of here, and so they were let out. But this was part of the education, and you think about, you had to experience that for yourself to shake that notion, and then they're shown, look, do you want, what is the actual happiness that can not just last forever, but grow and evolve and get better forever, that would constitute the basis for the state of mind that you would call heaven? And that is the joy of helping, the joy of doing something good, the joy, and you could put it like this, the joy of doing something for a cause. If you have something you really believe in, something you really want to put into the world, and you love what it is and its effect, working to make that thing happen, there's an amazing level of joy there. And Swedenborg is saying that everybody, there's all kinds of joy in heaven. There is the joy of, having good food, having good company. There's beautiful sights there and all that. But all those are tertiary. Like the engine that makes it run is the joy of helping, and the knowing that somebody who's in need, somehow I am going to comfort them, I'm going to heal them, I'm going to serve them, I'm going to make life better. That's the thing that really motivates heaven, because that's what the divine love is. That's what God loves, is increasing the happiness of other people. So, there's the priority there. Is the foundation of heaven is, how can I do something meaningful that helps? And that's part of how we can be cultivating that emotion in ourselves now. And he said that even if you don't have some kind of dream job where you're doing something that's obviously amazingly helpful to the world, you can still, in your occupation, do every stage of it faithfully, justly, with an eye to really performing a service in the public. And you can start to be cultivating that and start to sort of feel that, what he would call heavenly joy, even though it's in a more muted form here. But that's sort of the rudiments of the heavenly mindset that we can be growing in us now.
That's awesome.
Love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, that is beautiful. I'm glad you pointed that out, because we don't hear that enough. Along these lines, I was listening to a show of yours recently, and you were talking about how good spirits and bad spirits follow us according to the thoughts, the feelings, the actions that we have, that we re-stimulate, and how it draws in the beings that correspond with those, that have those loves of those actions, and they develop committees or parties of people who are just waiting for us to do these actions. And then as a result, that even spurs us on to doing the action and doing more of it. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, of course. And so this was the thing that was most shocking to Swedenborg. The immediacy of the interaction between his urges and desires, his thought patterns, and the spiritual world, both in the positive and the negative sense. But it became absolutely critical to his understanding of everything. And before I was talking about the consciousness network that we're in, and him being able to have angelic conversation trickle down pretty directly into his dream life. Well, he says that consciousness is in some senses communal, in that you can actually have that principle I was talking about, where what love is what draws things together. Well, that's a spiritual principle, right? So it draws spirits together. We have a spirit right now. We've got a physical body, but we've got a spirit in it. And I think that's many traditions say that. So we're actually making those moves right now based on what we love. And we can be, the more that we do something in freedom because we want to do it. So this would not be, oh, my friends kind of pressured me into doing something I didn't want to do. This is stuff that we pursue when we're in a state of freedom. That becomes part of who we are, and it starts to gain spiritual reinforcement. There's a million parallels for this. You start to feed an animal, like a stray cat, it's going to come to your house every day. So there's spiritual communities that our spirit is kind of interacting with, and if we indulge in whatever kind of joy we indulge in, attracts spirits who are interested in that joy, and so you're going to start to get this reinforcing effect where they know it. And I don't want to make it sound like, it can be a little freaky, like, there are spirits peering over my shoulder, but I don't think it's quite that direct. I think it's more like they don't necessarily know what we're doing, where we are. We don't know what they are, but we are linked across these kind of lines. And that's a conversation we could have several shows about, because he seems to have this whole spectrum of how aware the spiritual world is of us. But in principle, just to know that you link up with people who are like you in the spirit. And I think we see this, you search for things on the internet, then the next time you search, it shows those sorts of things in your search results. Your algorithm is changing based on where you go on the web and where you spend your time. So it is with our spiritual connection. So you can have this reinforcement of good or bad things based on where we go. But the good news is this revelation to Swedenborg that there is spiritual influence in the thoughts and feelings was his grand tool for escaping it, for getting out of the fray. And it's actually been one of the most it's the reason why I'm so gung-ho about Swedenborg is the potency of this belief that you're not necessarily everything you think, and you're not necessarily everything you feel. But you can, instead of saying, well, because I believe this, because I kind of feel this, it's true, but instead to sort of approach it with the same kind of skepticism. When you turn on the TV and it's somebody telling you how to live and what to believe about the news cycle or something like that, especially if it's somebody that you know has a differing view than you, you're very skeptical of everything they say. And to essentially take that same skepticism and apply it to your own thoughts and feelings. And rather than just, oh, it's there, so it's true, weigh it against your spiritual principles, weigh it against the things that you know about life. I could go on and on about that, but that has been this awesome tool in gaining some leverage over, because I was using it, I was 10 years ago or so, I was very heavily depressed and had like obsessive compulsive and all this, and I was really struggling for any way to gain leverage over the chaotic nature of my internal state. And it's not like Swedenborg was a magic pill that got rid of everything, but it did give me this sense of like, oh, just because it feels like I feel anxious and miserable and like the world is collapsing, doesn't mean that the world really is. This could just be this, sort of spiritual predation, on me, or this cloud of falsity. Just like here, I know that when the sun goes down, it's going to come back up. So I don't freak out. It can be the same thing inside.
Good point.
That's awesome.
Adam's got a question.
I do, yeah. Thanks, Curtis, for talking with us. This is a great
pleasure.
honor to talk with you, man. One of the videos that I watched that kind of came to mind when you were just talking about our immediate interaction with these other realms and our positive, negative thoughts and things. You talked about experiencing resistance when we do act on the things that we are joyful about, and we find the things that we're passionate about. That could perhaps be our way of recognizing evil spirits, I think is the way that you put it, when we experience resistance to those things. Could you elaborate on that just a little bit, please?
Yeah, so it seems like there's this interconnected nature to heaven and hell are in the mind. And, I mean, connected to the mind, right? And you can have evil spirits, which, evil spirits, good spirits. These are people who love destructive things or love good things. And when we try to change who we are, we set out and say, I want to do something good, or I want to change, we're going to be upsetting these relationships. And that the Swedenborg describes, if evil spirits have a good thing going with us, they don't want to give that up. If they're kind of feeding off of our misery or our negativity, why would they want to walk away from a free lunch? And I could talk forever about this. He describes this whole complex struggle. I mean, that what's happening in life is sort of our spiritual rebirth, where we go from he says it mirrors the creation story in Genesis, that you go from first it's this void and darkness, and this is when we're totally asleep in our ego world. We don't really think about our impact on others. We don't really think about the nature of our choices and what we're doing. But slowly, as we grow and pursue our spiritual path, there's that let there be light. When we first start to understand, wait, there's good and bad, and I've got to try to get a handle on this. And the rest of the story is us, moving up and out of that. And there's all kinds of struggle in there. There's all kinds of battles. And what's happening is, God is essentially pulling us out of all these negative connections that we have. So actually sometimes the turmoil that you can feel inside is a good sign, because it's like when the body has a fever and it's trying to rid itself of a pathogen. Things get all stirred up because, where the status quo is being interrupted. And so you feel this kind of internal clashes, which is like heaven, going to battle on your behalf and hell not wanting to give you up. But yet we feel it in, this sabotage of the good things in our life. He has this amazing number about how, hell can tell what you love, and they want to destroy that. But that's what they're going after. And to me, again, this is amazing ammunition to be able to just navigate those states of turmoil better. If I understand the game, because all evil and falsity go together, all the schemes in the world. You think about people who nowadays try to trick elderly people into donating money to something that's not real, or they try to steal your credit card information, or sell you something that's not. It all depends on deception. It needs falsity. Evil needs falsity to be able to operate. And so it is in your mind that the only way negativity can have power over you is if it can operate clandestinely, if there is a way in which it can hide. But the more you cast this light on it, which is the knowledge of what's going on, the less power it has. So it's been this amazing. It's not like I feel like I understand the inner reaches of the mind. I don't have the same kind of lucidity Swedenborg had. But just getting the rudiments of it, like I have, has been probably the most potent tool in my life for trying to navigate through the ups and downs and these forces that just seem to be kind of against me in my mind. So hopefully that relates.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That sounds good.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Your story is very helpful to a lot of people. It helps all of us to find ways to navigate just by seeing how you have as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, the more emotional upheaval a person goes through in their life, the more qualified or able they are to speak to the psychological issues that others are having, because they've been there. And so spiritually, when we go through these things, I know I've had a lot of emotional turmoil and things, cause you to look deeper, you get deeper answers, and then you come back with more profound information.
The wounded healer.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Isn't that totally amazing that it's universally realized that going through hard things, you gain something from it. You know, isn't that sort of a miracle in itself?
Yeah, I think we were just talking about it. I forget who I just saw, so I can't quote him correctly, but said, you know, our strengths can become our weaknesses, and our weaknesses become our strengths.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you want to know what you're really good at, look at what you're really bad at. You want to know where, you know, your Achilles heel is, you know, look at where you're doing really good, you know, because that can turn around and bite you. I guess because right off the top of my head, you know, it's a fun subject, and I think a lot of people, you know, should know about this. Bathroom spirits. We're talking about spirits who actually derive a sense of joy from a person spending abnormally long time sitting on the toilet. This is a very specific kind of spirit, and you'd think, well, where are these spirits coming from? They're coming out of the woodwork. They're just like making themselves up. But that's a real thing Swedenborg saw.
So you couldn't find anything more bizarre than the stuff Swedenborg reports. But the thing that, and certainly I'm sure there's plenty of people who come across something like that and they're like, yep, he lost his mind. And he certainly, when he started publishing these books, you know, he, like I said, he was a scientist, and he was doing very well for himself, and obviously now no one's heard of him, you know, because this guy's off the deep end. So everything, you can't have a spiritual system that doesn't account for all of life. And that particular experience, so he's got these spirits who are somehow, when Swedenborg, I'm trying to remember exactly the setting in the passage, but I think it's that when Swedenborg is using the loo, there are certain spirits who just want to be in that environment. And that actually is because of this thing I was talking before, correspondences. That if you think about, there's a Netflix series right now, there's a couple of them about serial killers. There's one about like Ted Bundy, you know, and there's one about BTK. These people who did these horrific things and did them over and over again. And the shocking thing always is in those that when you actually see the person, you're like, oh, they just look like a normal person. Like, how could somebody like that be holding this horrible stuff inside of them? Well, that's because the physical world is governed by physical stuff. So what you're like in your thoughts and feelings and your actions doesn't show up in the way your body is and in the way you see yourself. But spiritually, everything is what it represents. So the kind of desires and stuff that push people to do horrible things, you know how you had those angels talking, and what they talked about fell into this Swedenborg's dream as somebody who had a superficial mindset, right? Well, what do the most terrible things people can think and feel and do? What would correspond to those? It'd be the most disgusting stuff we know of, which some of that is excrement, right? So you have spirits who want to hang around stuff that's connected to excrement physically because they love what you could call spiritual excrement, which is this hatred of people, vengeance, killing, all this sort of stuff, right? So you have all these spiritual things that in a way you could look around at the world here, and it's giving you a map of what the spiritual reality is like, and you just see the way everything is and the way that we've got to, that we all walk around and we're friendly and we can be good, but we've got to make sure we've got somewhere to dump our waste, or else society would quickly collapse. So it is inside of us that we've got these good and true impulses, but also you've got to have a way of taking the negative stuff and safely disposing of it. So all of that is linked together, and it ends up with the headline, Bathroom Spirits.
Wow.
It sure does. At least today it does.
Yeah, that's right.
We don't have much time, but I do want to ask, Swedenborg, did he have any favorite prayers, any sort of kind of turnkey meditations that he really harped on that you found that were most significant for him to impress on people?
Yeah, for him, so let's see. In his journal, he kept a journal while he was transitioning into his spiritual period. So it was initially a dream journal, which was really rare at the time. And he would actually sort of psychoanalyze his own dreams. And this was kind of before psychology, so it was pretty cutting edge at the time. And he was documenting, he didn't know what he was documenting at the time, but documenting his spiritual awakening, which came with tons of this turmoil we were talking about. And he had a huge pride in his own intelligence because he was so accomplished and so smart, and he had to really wrestle with that and really be kind of broken down to get to where he was because of his pride and everything. I know that he would talk about, after really being through the ringer, he would say that it's best if I just cast my cares on the Lord like a little child. He used that phrase a few times, that he went from really feeling like he was superior to most of the human race to feeling like, no, God help me out. And sometimes I like to use that because when I am beset by all this negativity and depression and anxiety and everything that can really wrap you up and you don't know how to get out, really the way to slip through it all, it's grabbing you by your sense that you need to be the one who does it all. But when you acknowledge that, oh wait, God is going to take care of me, that's my life planning department, patch the call through to God instead, suddenly you're not vulnerable in the same way. So that's just one. I'm sure there's others, but that's the first one that popped to mind.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. I have one thing that I want to throw out there. In one of your videos, you talked about divine gravity, and I absolutely love that term. And I think it's cool how it correlates with you. You talked about the physical realm, that one of the main laws is gravity. And I love how you correlate that with what's going on in the spiritual world by saying divine gravity. Could you elaborate on that term just a little bit?
Sure. So the physical world is like it is because it's sort of like the skin or the outermost ripple of the spiritual world. So everything here is a reaction and a representation, or almost like an echo of the spiritual world. So just like there's this, you think about the sun keeping the earth where it needs to be, and the gravity from the sun, combined with the earth's velocity and everything that keeps us where we can be. And gravity, in the earth is what keeps us from flying out into space. So gravity is like the divine love that's pulling everybody as far into happiness as they can be. So you have divine love and wisdom, which is sort of the spiritual equivalent of the sun that we have here, working to always pull us in the right direction. So you can, even though it seems like your life is going in all these different tangents, and why did this cereal box fall, and why isn't this thing happening that I was thinking needed to happen for me to be a success in life, and why does it feel like I'm going backwards? But what we don't realize is that actually that is divine gravity pulling us along the right paths to get where we need to go. Even if we don't know where that destination is, the divine does know, and that's, you can trust that that's always pulling you in the right direction.
That reminds me of something that Swedenborg, where he talks about how if somebody wants to be with somebody else, the most expeditious way, or the faster that they're going to show up, is really like how in accord they are with this other person. So the more they love this other person, the faster they appear. The lesser the love, the longer the journey to them. The more they're out of accord, the further the distance. And so it really is about the inner life, dictating things. There's no buffer. There's no, ego, fakeism, or anything like that. You're just either in accord or you're out of accord. And that sets your coordinates in the spiritual world.
It's beautiful.
Well, Curtis, it's been an honor, a pleasure, and I will continue to watch your show, and hopefully some more people will too, because it's amazing. And we really appreciate you coming on with us today, and we'll have all your information for the show and everything posted on our Facebook page. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we go?
Thanks so much. I really enjoyed getting to have this conversation with you, and I'll talk to you hopefully soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks a lot, Curtis.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Yeah.
All right, so we only have a couple minutes left. Next week, we're going to be talking with Jürgen Zerwi. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He lives over there I think he's in London right now. And he's written books called Multidimensional Man, Vistas to Infinity. And this guy, not unlike Swedenborg, through the cultivating of a dream life with a dream journal and in conjunction with meditation, began entering into spiritual realities some time ago. I'm not even sure how long it's been. It's been a long time. And he also is a computer animator. So he started to work on an Oculus program so he could create a 3-dimensional virtual reality walkthrough. Well, that project stalled, unfortunately, but I did see some of the animations he started, and they were pretty cool. So we'll be talking to him next week. Also, I think next week we should talk a bit about the Christ, the light bearer, and Archangel Michael. Okay? Because these 3 beings, are intimately connected. Light bearer being Lucifer, Archangel Michael, some believing it's a manifestation of Christ, or the face of Christ. Lucifer being equated with Christ, Jesus's brother. And that took me a long time to chew over, because I had a lot to learn from the Theosophical school of thought. How could you say something like this? Well, what is the light bearer? What is the Christ? What is the divine wisdom that Lucifer originally had? And what is the difference between Lucifer and Satan? They're not the same being. Most of us don't know that, and it is important to know. So we're going to broach those pulse-raising topics next week. So follow and like us on Facebook. Go to newprecept.com. Find awesome lectures there. Contact us. Give us your ideas, questions, comments, concerns. And email me at robert@newprecept.com.
You can check out the work that I'm doing in the world at 3dayflight.com. You can hear one of our songs playing right now. You can hear more at 3dayflight.com. And also, my wife and I have a cafe here in Memphis called Imagine Vegan Cafe, imaginevegancafe.com.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Everybody have a great day.
Saw my baby smile. The smell of coffee found its way into my
The Mid-South station with the most local talk and CBS News at the top of every hour. KWAM, Memphis.